Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about, and I have to look at my notes because I can never get the order of the letters right, and we are going to be taking a look at the SPFBO 10 competition. Just in case you don't know what this competition is, it is a competition put on by the fantasy author Mark Lawrence. I forget what, he just had a really popular book. I forget the book that wouldn't burn. I think it was his most recent release that people were absolutely in love with last year, but he's the one who hosts this competition. It's 300 self-published books that are submitted, and they are then broken into 10 teams of 30, and those teams and or individuals, I think there are some individuals again this year who are going to read all 30 of these self-published fantasy books and then kind of break it down to, I think they select one and they submit it to the group as a whole. Everybody reads those 10 and then they vote and select a winner from there, which I think is a really cool thing. I think this is a great thing for the community, giving self-published authors the ability to get out there, get some publicity. We all know that going the self-published route is not easy, and it can be very hard to get, promoted and get people to read your stuff. So I think this is an awesome thing that Mark Lawrence does for the community, and I implore you to give self-published stuff a chance if you haven't. Some of my favorite books I've read in recent memory are some self-published books. So, don't think that the quality is not there just because they were not able to get a traditional publisher. With the amount of books people are writing and everything, there's just no way everybody's going to get a traditionally published book, and self-publishing a book is a great way to get your work out there, and it can definitely find an audience. And quickly, I just want to mention some of my past history with this competition. Last year, I made kind of a similar video, and I think it was 10 books that I was going to read from this competition. And I quickly realized that that was a monumental task, especially last year when I was trying to read all of the Casemiro, and it didn't leave me a whole lot of time to read other things. So I'm taking a slightly different approach this year. These are basically 10 books that when I went through all 300, that really stuck out to me, whether it be the name of the book, the cover, or what it was about. I didn't check every single entry, but these are the ones that when I was going through kind of stuck out to me for the most part. So this is where some of these are just straight up cover picks. I think the cover is super cool and it really piqued my interest. Not all of them are that case, but I do think all of them do have pretty cool covers. So these are not going to be anything I'm going to be reading immediately, but these are all ones that I'm going to put into the backlog and hopefully pick up at some point. I do want to continue reading some more self-published work. I have read I think just a few handful this year, and only maybe one or two last year, and it's something I'm trying to work on as I continue my reading journey, because there are definitely so many self-published books out there that are just as good as any traditionally published book. So that is kind of my plan for this year. These are just 10 that I wanted to highlight, and I really implore you to go look at the website that I'll have linked in the description that has all 300 books, the teams that are going to be reading them, because just because this is my taste doesn't mean there won't be ones on there that are going to speak to you more than they speak to me. So once again, I highly recommend you go and look at all of the books. So the first book that I have on this list, and this is in no particular order except for the last one, the last book that I'll mention today is the one with my favorite cover. So first up, we have The First Scars, and this is by Ivern K. Hill. Before resurrection, there must be death. The immortal branded are needed once more. The Duralic curse has returned to the fatherland, and an entire city has fallen. The Great One calls for aid, and the devout and the desperate come in droves to sear their skin with his mark. So I think this sounds pretty cool. I always like the idea of like undead armies and everything like that, going in and battling and conquering a city. I'm interested in what this mark is and everything and who controls this army. It sounds like there might be some political, dark fantasy elements in here, and that is always something. And obviously, pretty cool cover, somebody with a sword. I'm not that hard to please, and that one delivers. Next up is probably the book with my second favorite cover, and this is Godsfall, the Book of One. And I think this will be a book for maybe some of the people out there who really enjoy fantasy romance. It's not something that I have really tried yet, but after I saw the cover, it grabbed my interest, and I'm not gonna lie, I kind of want to experience a fantasy romance at some point, so maybe this will be the one that does it. In a world where angels and demons are destined to destroy each other, can forbidden love rewrite their fate? Dive into the electrifying world of Godsfall, the Book of One by Adam Gaffen, where urban fantasy collides with steamy paranormal romance. Meet Kalal, a formidable demon, and Faith, a radiant angel whose love story defies the very foundations of heaven and hell. Like I said, I'm not sure this is actually one that I would like, but I very much like the cover, and like I said, fantasy romance, it's hot right now, and maybe this would be a good first introduction to it, and I'm sure there are going to be people out there that do enjoy it. Next up is a pretty crazy looking cover. I mean, fantasy, you gotta love anything with a dragon and a wizard on it going at it, and that is the Unspoken Truce of Casemiro by Christopher Clouser. Casemiro, a down on his luck wizard with little magical power, travels back to the location of his greatest accomplishment 20 years before, the village of Linenhold, to recapture his glory, power, and perhaps a little coin. And I'm assuming the cover is probably when he does that, because fighting a dragon, how much more epic does that get? I think this is another one that the cover definitely influenced me, but as I read even more of the description, which I'm not going to read too much for all of these because we'll be here forever, I'm not the best reader, I think this looks like a pretty cool book. Next up, we have another dragon book with Through Blood and Dragons by R.M. Schultz. And apparently this is going to be a video game soon, so that is pretty cool. Hymerin is a world divided by mysterious forests and the vast lake of fire. Suspicion brews on both sides, and the south has fallen into chaos as battle and quarrels rage between kingdoms. But anyway, another one with a cool dragon on it. Once again, looks like there are 2 books in the series, and I think it is pretty cool. The one reason I put this on here is that it's going to be a video game, and I think that is pretty cool. Next up, we have Fortitude's Prize by Ceril and Domace. The master of Fortitude, the largest city in the Flying Isles, has been robbed. Normally this wouldn't concern Edward Bradsley. He's an alchemist and a surgeon on a small privateering vessel, and there are much larger and better equipped ships in the Fortitude. It only becomes his concern when his crew is commissioned to retrieve the master's stolen property. So I thought this one looked really cool, and the idea of there being like flying fortresses, it almost gave me the idea of like Waterworld, but in the sky, which I thought was pretty cool. I know that Waterworld kind of gets panned as like this massive flop, but it is kind of an interesting premise, and a fantasy twist on this up in the air sounds pretty cool. Also, pirates, that's kind of cool. Next up is City of Rain by William Lejeune. An ancient mystery, a sorceress in hiding and the wizard who hunts her. Daughter of a minor house and a fledgling maid, Summer Fonte yearns for a life beyond her closeted world. But when her dying master entrusts her with a mysterious parchment, she must use all she has learned to survive. So once again, a little bit of a heist one, a little bit of mystery, a little bit of maybe bounty hunter-esque, being chased, you're trying to get away from the bad guy, and another great cover. Next up is Black Dot White, The Powers of Equilibrium, Book 1. And this was another one, really loved the color, and anytime something has like the balancing of 2 sides, I find that really interesting. I would expect there to be some gray moral surroundings happening in this book where you're kind of trying to figure out, well, how much of one side needs versus the other, and some, maybe some moral quandaries there. Balance is a hard thing to maintain, even more when a war is brewing. The 2 continents used to be one until the almighty Jesurer separated them and forbidden yin and yang from meddling with mortal affairs. And for 3,000 years, the sacred books of the 2 gods have been kept hidden by their order. So once again, sounds very much like there's going to be some back and forth, good and evil kind of stuff in this one. Next up is A Night of the Burnt Men. The world of Lavish is covered in eternal darkness by the god who lives in the mountains and hasn't seen a sunrise for thousands of years. The creature and people have adapted to the darkness, and a special few can harness the magic of the dark. A foremost soldier of the Empire is forced to flee with his daughter, hide in remote towns, but the Empire still searches for him. So the reason I picked this one is it definitely gave me some Mistborn vibes a little bit, just with the darkness and being able to use that I don't know. For some reason, when I read that description for the first time, Mistborn came to my mind, and so that definitely piqued my interest. Next up is Embers of Dusk, Lost Light of Inarin. Adolin is a half-human, half-Aedarin, a race lost to time after inciting war, but she is no less human for it. After her world is thrown into chaos, when an unthinkable tragedy shatters her heart, she is forced to seek answers in Parilium, but is met with only rumor. So once again, this sounds like kind of a classic hero's journey, trying to figure out something about her, and she'll probably discover all kinds of powers along her way and everything, but I don't know. That's one of those tropes that I really enjoy. Okay, and now we are on to the last one, and the cover I think is my favorite one out of all 300 books. I think this is my favorite one. It just speaks to the Jim Bro caveman brain that I sometimes have, and this book is Primal Fury, Trial of the Berserker. And I mean, look at that cover with the bear. Orshin wants nothing more than to pass the trial and become a berserker. But to do that, he must travel into the wilderness completely alone and do battle with the abominations that live in the tundra, a strange, constantly mutating species known only as the herd. But when he makes his way into that icy desert, not everything is as he has been told. The herd beasts don't all act as he expected. Something strange is going on. The ancient enemy of his people is changing, evolving in new and dangerous ways. They are growing more canny and more deadly, but why? So once again, this just sounds like it might be something like 300, where just kind of like action from the beginning, super macho, turn your brain off, enjoy action. It could be deeper, but from that little synopsis and the cover, it really just seems like it's going to speak to that lizard brain that I still kind of have sometimes. But those are the 10 books that really caught my attention. If you go through the list, I would love to know any of the ones that you are thinking about reading, ones that you really like the cover, any of that stuff, and I would love to hear all of that down below in the comments. But that's all for me, and as always, have a good one.